Most people think what separates powerful people from everyone else is confidence, or intelligence, or dominance. That magnetic, almost animalistic energy that makes a room shift when certain people walk in. Machiavelli thought the same thing, until he didn't. He spent his life inside the courts of Renaissance Italy, watching kings negotiate, generals betray each other, rulers rise from nothing and collapse into dust. He studied power the way a surgeon studies a body, not from the outside, from the inside, with the chest cracked open. And what he found wasn't what anyone expected. It wasn't the loudest man who lasted. It wasn't the most beloved. It wasn't even the strongest. It was the one who had something the others didn't. Something quiet. Something most people will spend their entire lives actively running away from. Because developing it requires a kind of psychological surgery that the average person simply isn't willing to perform on themselves. There is one trait, one single psychological characteristic. And once you see it, once you really understand what Machiavelli was pointing at, you will never look at power, influence, or control the same way again. We're going to get there. But first, let's destroy everything you think you know. Act 1, the illusion. What you were told about power is wrong. Here is what most people believe about power. They believe it looks like confidence. The man who walks into a room and speaks first, who laughs the loudest, who dominates the conversation. They believe power is loud, that it announces itself, that it needs to be seen to be real. They believe it looks like aggression, the one who pushes hardest, who doesn't back down, who intimidates through sheer force of will or physical presence. And when they try to become powerful, this is what they imitate: the loudness, the posturing, the aggression, the performance. Machiavelli watched this, and he called it exactly what it was: a trap. He wasn't writing philosophy in an ivory tower. He was sitting inside the courts of Renaissance Florence, one of the most politically violent, psychologically sophisticated environments in human history. These weren't just political arenas. They were psychological warfare zones disguised as banquet halls, where alliances were dressed up as friendships, where loyalty wore the face of love, where a smile across the table could mean an assassin at your door by morning. In that environment, Machiavelli made an observation that changed everything. The most powerful people in the room were almost always the quietest, not passive, not weak, not absent, quiet, controlled, unreadable, moving through the room like something ancient and patient, watching, calculating, never quite reacting the way others expected. And the ones who performed power, who displayed it, announced it, who needed everyone in the room to see it, they were always the first to fall. So what did the quiet ones actually have? What was the real variable? Act 2, the dark trait revealed. The one thing powerful people don't have that controls everyone else. It isn't strength. History is full of strong men who were broken by weak ones who knew how to manipulate them. It isn't charisma. The most charismatic people are often the most emotionally exposed. They need the room to respond to them, which means the room has leverage over them. It isn't intelligence. You can be the smartest person in the building and still be completely controlled. If someone knows what you're afraid of losing, the trait Machiavelli identified is something different, something most people won't talk about, because admitting it exists means admitting how completely it controls them. It is the absence of emotional dependency, no need for approval, no fear of loss that overrides clear thinking, no involuntary reaction to provocation, the complete, incultivated, removal of the internal triggers that other people can pull to make you move. Machiavelli described it across the prince in different forms, but the core observation is this: rulers who relied on being loved were always the first to fall, because the moment your power depends on other people's feelings toward you, you have handed them the switch. They don't need an army. They just need to withdraw the thing you need, and you will restructure your entire behavior to get it back. That is not power. That is an invisible leash, and most people are walking around with dozens of them attached. Here's what makes this misunderstood. This is not about being fearless. Powerful people feel fear. They feel doubt. They feel the pull toward approval, toward validation, toward the comfort of being liked and accepted. They are not made of different material. The difference is this: they are not controlled by it. Fear passes through them without dictating action. Provocation registers without triggering reaction. They observe the emotional signal, and then they choose, deliberately, without the gap where most people lose everything. Think about what this means in practice. The weak are predictable. Poke them in the right place, threaten what they need, offer what they want, and you know exactly what they'll do. They become mechanical, readable, manageable, and predictability in any power structure is the same thing as controllability. The one who controls his reactions controls everything. Because the moment you cannot be predicted, the moment people cannot locate your triggers, you become ungovernable. And something ungovernable cannot be owned. That is the trait, not what you have, what you've removed. Act 3. The 3 mechanisms of Machiavellian power. The 3 pillars. How it actually works. Let's break this down into the 3 specific psychological mechanisms. Because this isn't abstract, it operates through very specific patterns. And once you understand each one, you'll start seeing them everywhere. Pillar 1. Remove the leash. Approval, independence. Machiavelli watched rulers negotiate from a position of need, and he watched them lose every single time. Here's why. When someone knows you need something from them, approval, validation, their good opinion, their loyalty, they possess leverage over you whether they're conscious of it or not. You will unconsciously reshape your behavior to protect access to that thing. You will soften positions you should hold firm. You will tolerate disrespect you should not tolerate. You will make decisions that serve the relationship rather than your actual goals. And the people around you, and even people who mean you no harm, will begin to feel this. They'll begin to understand at some level that you can be moved, that your decisions are not entirely your own, that there is a force operating on you from the outside. Machiavelli's specific observation in The Prince was that rulers who governed through love, who needed to be beloved by the people, were always manipulated by that need. Their political opponents didn't need to defeat them militarily. They just needed to threaten their reputation, their popularity, their image, and the ruler would do their work for them, changing course, making concessions, abandoning strategy, to preserve the thing they couldn't function without. This is not ancient history. Walk into any workplace and find the person in leadership who needs to be liked. Watch how they run a meeting. Watch how they respond to pushback. Watch how quickly their positions shift when someone in the room looks disappointed. They do not lead, they perform. And everyone in the room, consciously or not, understands that their approval is the actual mechanism of control. Approval independence is not coldness. It is not contempt for others or indifference to outcomes. It is the deliberate removal of approval as a requirement. You can appreciate being liked without needing it. You can value relationships without being controlled by the fear of losing them. The moment approval becomes optional, your decisions become your own. Pillar 2. The power of unreadability, emotional restraint. You cannot manipulate something you cannot predict. This is one of the most underappreciated mechanisms in the entire architecture of power, and Machiavelli understood it completely. The ability to produce a controlled response, to pause where others would react, to move slowly where others would lurch, is not just emotionally healthy, it is strategically devastating to anyone trying to influence you. Think about how manipulation works in practice. Someone provokes you, says something designed to trigger defensiveness, or anger, or insecurity. They're not just trying to make you feel something. They're trying to make you move in a predictable direction. Anger makes you say things you'll regret. Insecurity makes you over-explain. Fear makes you concede. Every emotional reaction is also a behavioral prediction, and your enemies are counting on that prediction being correct. The calculated pause destroys this. When you respond to provocation with stillness, with a measured, unhurried reply that doesn't reveal what moved inside you, the person doing the provoking loses their map. They threw something at you and watched you not flinch. Now they don't know what works. Now they are the uncertain one. Machiavelli wrote that fortune, the chaos of circumstance, favors those who impose their will upon it, not those who simply react to it. The man who moves deliberately, who acts from a position of internal stillness rather than external pressure, bends events to his direction rather than being bent by them. History's most consequential figures, the ones who actually reshape the world around them, shared this characteristic. They were not impulsive. They were not easily provoked. They moved as if time worked differently for them, and it did because they were not spending time reacting. They were using it to decide.
Pillar 3. Detached precision, acting without the gap. Here is the sequence of the week. Feel to hesitate to react. Something happens. It triggers an emotion. The emotion floods the decision-making process. And by the time action happens, it isn't really action. It's the emotion expressing itself through behavior. It is the environment pulling the lever. Here is the sequence of the powerful. Observe, decide, move. Something happens. It's registered without being amplified. A decision is made, clean, stripped of emotional interference. And then action follows. Not reaction. Action. The gap between stimulus and response. That's where everything is decided. Viktor Frankl described this as the fundamental freedom. The space between what happens to you and how you choose to respond. Machiavelli, centuries earlier, located the same space as the source of political survival. The rulers who collapsed were the ones whose stimulus-response gap had closed, where provocation and reaction were almost simultaneous. They were puppets of circumstance. The ones who survived and dominated had learned to widen that gap until it became a controlled territory. A space where they lived and decided before anyone else even realized a decision was being made. Real power doesn't perform. It doesn't need to display itself or prove anything. It simply moves, quietly, precisely, without the trembling that betrays the hand of someone who needs the outcome too much. Kill the performance of bravery. Kill the display of dominance. What remains when all of that is stripped away is something much older and much quieter. And it is far more dangerous to everyone around it. Act 4. How to actually build this. This isn't who you are, it's what you train. Now, the part that actually matters, because Machiavelli didn't write a self-help book. He wrote an autopsy of human weakness. He dissected what made people fail and what made people last. Not to be inspirational, but to be accurate. And what the autopsy reveals is not a personality type. It is not a gift some people are born with. It is a set of trained behaviors, cultivated over time through deliberate practice and ruthless honesty about where your leashes actually are. Here are 3 concrete shifts. Not philosophy, not motivation. Practice. Shift. 1. Stop explaining yourself. Powerful people do not justify their decisions to everyone who asks. They do not owe a rationale to people who haven't earned access to their internal process. This will feel uncomfortable at first, because the impulse to explain is rooted in the need for approval, the need to make sure people understand, agree, don't think badly of you. Every unnecessary explanation is a small act of submission. It says, your opinion of my decision matters enough that I need to manage it. Stop. Make the decision. State it clearly, move. This does not mean being dismissive or unkind. It means understanding that your decisions belong to you, and that the constant bid for validation is one of the most visible leashes a person can wear. Shift 2. The 5-second pause. In every high-pressure moment, when someone pushes you, challenges you, says something designed to provoke a reaction. Pause. 5 seconds. Full stop. Not because you don't have a response, because you are choosing when and how to deliver it. This pause does something powerful on 2 levels. Internally, it breaks the reflex loop. It forces your decision-making process to engage before your emotional response takes over the controls. Externally, it signals something to the person across from you, that you are not urgently compelled to react, that you are not afraid of silence, that they did not land the hit they were hoping for. People who expect emotional reactions are deeply unsettled by stillness. It removes their feedback. It leaves them uncertain. And uncertainty in any power dynamic shifts gravity. Train this in small moments first, the minor irritations, the low-stakes provocations. Build the reflex in conditions where the cost of failure is low, so that when the moment actually matters, it's already in your muscle memory. Shift 3. Audit your needs. This is the most important one, and the most uncomfortable. Make a list, honest, private, written, of what you currently require from other people to feel functional. Approval from a specific person, validation in a professional environment, comfort from a relationship, the sense that others see you the way you want to be seen. Every item on that list is a leash, not because needing things from people is inherently shameful. It isn't. Human beings are wired for connection and validation, but most people are completely unconscious of which needs are running their behavior. They make decisions they believe are strategic, and don't realize those decisions are actually structured around protecting access to whatever they can't bear to lose. The audit makes it visible, and what you can see, you can work with. You are not eliminating the need for human connection. You are locating the specific dependencies that are being used by others and by circumstance to govern your actions without your conscious consent. Name them, look at them clearly, and begin, slowly, deliberately, to loosen each one. The quiet shift. Let's go back to the beginning. Most people think what separates the powerful from everyone else is confidence, or strength, or the kind of magnetic presence that announces itself the moment it enters a room. Machiavelli sat inside one of the most sophisticated power environments in human history. He watched hundreds of people rise and fall. He studied the pattern until the pattern was undeniable. And what he found was not what they taught you. The trait is not something you add, it's something you remove. The removal of emotional dependency. The elimination of the approval need, the trained capacity to feel the pull and not be governed by it. When you stop needing, you become the one others come to. Not because you've become cold, not because you've stopped caring about people or outcomes, but because you've stopped handing out control of your decisions to anyone with the right lever. That's not cruelty. That's not manipulation. That is Machiavellian, in the truest, oldest, most precise sense of the word. Next video, Machiavelli's most misunderstood rule. The one principle almost everyone gets backwards, and the reason it's the only thing standing between you and the people trying to use you. You won't want to miss it. If this one landed, subscribe. We're just getting started.